Hello and welcome back to our podcast series here in Vienna. We are at the DSM-Firmenich Aqua Days. My name is Moritz Müller. I'm the Managing Director of the fish side. With me here today is Ivo Lansbergen. He's the President of Animal Health and Nutrition at DSM-Firmenich. Welcome, Ivo.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ivo, we're going to have a conversation today about DSM-Firmenich as a company and beyond that, really your own personal role in the company and the ambition you yourself in animal nutrition and health, as well as the company has.
Yeah.
I think you just held a presentation.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
You feeling fresh?
Feeling fresh, excited as well. Really geared up, really, to talk about the very important topics actually of animal farming in general, but also sustainability. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, very good. DSM-Firmenich is a very interesting company.
Yeah.
I think it originated in 1907.
I think it was 1902.
1902.
But don't quote me on that. But indeed, I think it was 1902 or 1903. Indeed, yeah.
We will actually quote you on that.
Yeah.
And it came out of a Dutch mining concern. I think. Could you elaborate a little bit on the trajectory the company has had? Because I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's been quite fascinating, of course, and I only actually took 26 years out of that episode. So, company, let's say, roughly about 125 years old. 26 years. I've been actually of that 125 actually with the company. It started as you call the actually Dutch state mines, so really a mining company, coal mining, etc. And then at one point, of course, going more in fertilizers, actually also agricultural kind of space, then moving into petrochemicals, and later on actually materials and plastics, and later on actually then more into life sciences. So what you've seen happening over that period is that we actually took the carbon in a way out of the ground. And now we're actually just really reversing the whole discussion actually and saying, right, okay, how can we keep the carbon in the ground and actually make use of what we have? So that's somewhat of the history of DSM, but the number of transitions we've made over those years has been, if you think about it, actually quite astonishing. So many people don't know that DSM stands for mining company, and now we are literally talking about life sciences, human nutrition, animal nutrition, but then of course lately, clearly of course the merger with Firmenich. I'm less familiar with the Firmenich kind of angle, of course, but clear they're also very reputable. I can't remember the exact date of founding, but also is more than 100 years old. Fragrances, flavors, that's what they actually start developing. And that came together only 4 months ago. Mm-hmm. So it feels like already more than a year or even longer, because it's now DSM-Firmenich, not DSM any longer. And the reason why we did that is quite simple. You can't just simply actually come up with an ingredient necessarily only for providing that kind of solution for a customer. If you start actually adding there a taste component as well and making the total actually work. A very good example is the plant-based kind of space, of course, which is clearly taken off. So if you on the one hand actually provide all kind of ingredients on plant-based, but on the other side actually also the taste, make sure it's palatable, attractive for consumers. That's when you have a kind of a winning kind of concept, of course.
It's a winning team, yeah.
I just gave a very good example just a minute ago as well in my lecture or my opening speech. It was about Actimel. Mm-hmm. Now I will not do a promotion here for Danone, but
already happened.
I just did. So, but it's a very nice example where it's a dairy product. And the dairy product, of course, clearly comes from ruminants. And there, what we try to do from an animal nutrition perspective, try to lower the carbon footprint through the use of Bovaer. Mm-hmm. So you're reducing the carbon footprint by 30%. So that's a substantial gain. But of course, Actimel, then actually you also have then vitamins being added for health, nutritional reasons. You also have taste components coming into Actimel as well to make it actually taste very nice and attractive for consumers. So you see 3 out of the 4 business units of DSM-Firmenich coming back into one product in itself. A very clear example of what we're trying to do within DSM-Firmenich as it is. Okay.
Well, we'll go back to that at a later point. But you already mentioned something very interesting. So DSM has become DSM-Firmenich quite recently. Yeah. In the last 4 years, there's actually been quite a lot of change. I believe Biomin has been acquired, Austrian company Biomin, about 3-4 years ago in 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
And just this year now the merger has happened with Firmenich, who is a Swiss family company, I believe.
Yeah.
How did these decisions come about? What was the ambition behind them?
Yeah. Now, of course, they are somewhat, of course, they're connected on one end, but they're also standing on its own. So animal nutrition, at that point in time, there were no discussions with Firmenich. So at the time actually of Biomin acquisition, it's clear actually from an animal nutrition perspective, we looked into the value chain of animal nutrition and what's going on there. And it's clear that the need for what we call performance products, which are enhancing the performance of livestock, efficiency, effectiveness, but also reducing emissions, etc. That's the space in animal nutrition, and Biomin actually has a very good fit in there. And why? If you look into gut health ingredients, tackling the topic of antimicrobial resistance is one topic for sustainability. Another one, of course, is the biotransformation of mycotoxins. So there you can still use feed, which might be contaminated with mycotoxins. Again, a sustainability topic, because you make use of stuff which might be contaminated. You don't need to throw it away.
Right.
And the animal doesn't really turn sick. So again, a very big topic in sustainability. So that's been the driver for the acquisition of Biomin at that point in time. So enhancing the pillar of what we call performance solutions.
Okay.
Firmenich is a little bit more towards what I said earlier, actually, on then enhancing the total group and making it stronger, actually, in the life science space. You have to bear in mind that 4 years ago, when we did the acquisition of Biomin, we still had materials left. So Dyneema, which is the world's strongest fiber. We had resin still, we had engineering plastics. All those business units actually found a new home and a new owner. And as DSM, we've actually really now become a more focused company, as we call this. So focused on life sciences and in the human and animal applications. So that's where the Firmenich merger came in.
Okay. Very interesting. Now in your presentation just now, you mentioned the term the protein gap, I think. What is the role of DSM-Firmenich in closing that protein gap?
Yeah, now I see this actually in a few facets. Number one, of course, more into what we do today. And that's really making sure that we actually get more out of even less, i.e. feed conversion, feed efficiency, etc. The whole point I try to make here is there's a boundary to, of course, crop, to land mass, etc. So we need to try to become more efficient, so get more out of less. So the protein gap cannot be tackled if you don't do that. So the efficiency drive is a very important one, actually, where we do play a role. Very good example there is feed enzymes, for example. Make sure that the digestibility of feed is actually being enhanced. Or again, the gut, making sure that gut health is performing really in an optimal way. It applies for humans, it applies for animals as well. A healthy animal is simply actually more productive than a not so healthy animal. So that's where we play a very important role in animal nutrition as we have today. The other pillar we're actually working on right now is we are looking into groundbreaking technology. And there's other companies working on this as well. But it's really making use of our biotechnology. And I have to go back again a little bit in the history of DSM. So we had this merger with Gist. You may have read about it. Actually, that was back in I think the late 90s. And that's actually, Gist actually was started from yeast. So they did all kind of yeast for baking and also for beer brewing, etc. Anyway, that developed in itself. But we're also looking into yeast really as a potential of a protein source for animal feed.
Right, yeah.
And what we are working on now literally is using CO2, the stuff we have too much of. We all talk about CO2 on the one hand. On the other one, actually nitrogen, we also have too much of. A lot of debate in the Benelux, in Europe in general, Germany, UK, Denmark, but also in the south of the United States. So nitrogen and CO2, if you start feeding that to yeast and start developing, growing actually more, call this broth or protein, you can start using that as feed for animal. Now, then you start tackling a couple of topics here. Number one, of course, clearly CO2. Now, I don't think we need to say too much really on that. That's number one. Second one, food security. We are heavily dependent, of course, on all kind of feed flows around the world, from faraway destinations, actually just feeding it actually into Europe or the other way around, into China, etc. So having a local feed production is going to be very important, of course. So food security and feed security is a very important topic here as well. But also then, of course, the boundaries of planet Earth. Coming back to your question on protein gap. Because if you want to fill that protein gap, I'm afraid there's not much more land. There's no more planets as we have today. We don't know. Yeah, we can fly to the moon, but I'm not sure whether we can actually find arable land there. So what we're going to do, if 25%, and we're going to witness 25% population growth in the next 25 years, we will not have 25% more arable land. So we need to come up with new technologies, and that's also where DSM-Firmenich actually plays a role.
That is very interesting you mentioned that, because going a little bit into innovation science here, there's a certain curve, right, that plateaus out. There's diminishing returns at a certain point where paradigm shift is required. And the paradigm shift then opens up a new curve. You can then again have increasing returns than at the beginning. This ties into the next question on how DSM-Firmenich is approaching sustainability. And maybe you can take it from that perspective, because I think you open up a very interesting topic here in the fact that if we want to live sustainably on our planet, we cannot scale the way we scale. We have to scale efficiency with what we have. We have to do more with less. Where do you see the company right now in the sense of, are we in need of many paradigm shifts, or is there still efficiency on the curve to be gained?
I think there's still efficiency on the curve to be gained, and I'm a very strong believer in this. My background is actually in materials. I'm a chemical engineer, actually, and if I look into the way, typically in a materials kind of environment, certain things are being measured and then acted upon, I would say is probably a little bit more further ahead of what we see actually in the animal space. You have to deal with, of course, livestock, living animals. It's not that easy really to steer versus a material, of course, clearly. So there's a reason why that is. But if you start using data and really become way more precise, I can tell you that I think there's so much more to be gained. So the efficiency curve is not so much really about creating more products, etc. Yeah, that there will be space as well. We need to actually innovate in products. But I think the efficiency in the next decade is going to come from, I think, digitalization. Really becoming way more precise on what's happening at your farm for a farmer. With all the inputs there, that local climate, the weather patterns, the feed composition, etc. Having that data coming together and then actually making precise kind of advice on nutrition, in my view, is going to be a next frontier we could still actually exploit. Now, having said that, is that going to be enough? Don't know. It really depends on the adaptation, of course, also the potential it could offer. I was at a customer actually just on the segue where I saw tens of % of improvement. And there was not a customer actually who not been focusing on that actually for a long time. So I'm pretty amazed actually on the kind of steps you can still make. Is that going to be enough? That's the question now. I think we still have a topic, of course, of CO2 in general. So fuel-derived, oil-derived kind of CO2. We need to put a lid on that. So we need to go more for biogenic CO2. And then it come back to single-cell proteins, etc., and other technologies. So on the one hand, make use of what we have. And that's number one. Number two, go for precision services, use data. And number three, really look into totally new technologies like single-cell proteins.
Fascinating. How are you approaching sustainability in the company? I know this is a big question. I know you've made a lot of commitments within the company. I'll leave it to you to place the emphasis.
There's a couple of angles, of course, because you can talk about sustainability, of course, to the world to say we need to improve. But of course, we have a duty and a responsibility ourselves. So that's number one. So we're looking into, of course, the SBTi targets. We committed ourselves to SBTi, science-based targets, and that's scope 1 and 2. So looking in our own footprint, the electricity use, but also the use of green electricity, etc. So make very strong commitments. And we are going to go for actually 100% commitment, for example, on renewable energy. So we're just going to be totally renewable by 2030. So this is one of the commitments. We also got to be lowering the total carbon footprint in general. So we had made very strong commitments, and you find them actually on our internet site. So that's one. So really just making sure that we are doing what's right. Number two, of course, making sure that we are also focusing on our suppliers. Make sure that it's not only us, but also our suppliers are actually doing the same thing. And number three, make sustainability a business driver. And I'm a firm believer that it is a business driver. If I now speak to customers last night as well, but also this morning, Almar is a very good example, actually, where we just signed an agreement, actually, just to start measuring environment and environmental footprinting. Almar is a shrimp farmer in Ecuador, and they've been really, I would probably say, leading the pack, or at least be in the top tier of producers with regards to environmental footprint, but also in general. the question and the discussion I had with the president of the company, and he said, yeah, but and what is your footprint? I said, that's exactly my problem. I don't know. I know that what I'm doing is good, but I don't know to what extent. And that's what we need to do. I think creating that kind of tooling for the animal nutrition value chain, and make sure that they can actually have an insight on what's happening, making the invisible, i.e. environmental footprint, visible. And if you do that, you can actually create a race to the top. Because those farmers which are doing really well, they should really be rewarded then actually by the retailers where they supply to, or to the the restaurants who actually are taking off the shrimp.
Right, yes.
So, but you can only do that if you measure it. Otherwise, it ain't gonna happen, and it's just nice talk.
Yeah.
So making it measurable is, I think, one of the key elements we need to actually start getting into the gene pool and the way we actually operate in this value chain. And that's what we do. So we help.
Very interesting. I'm getting very excited. I'm holding back questions really I have, because if you're moving into the area of restorative aquaculture, we can talk another 3 hours about that. But just one little remark I make on that. We had a panel in Den Haag at the Ocean Innovation Conference, which was very interesting because we were discussing basically the potential of restorative aquaculture projects to actually have third-party impacts that are based on species that you never harvest. Okay. So in the sense of a local council says we need to up the water quality to make the beach more attractive. How about we bring in a seaweed provider? How about we bring in an oyster provider? We leave that in there. We pay the people to maintain this farm, and we benefit from the nutrient development and water filtration, basically. But we won't go into that.
That's really, I like that kind of example because I'm also getting more and more convinced that it's not just one player and then another player. It becomes an ecosystem, and definitely also in the value chain. So we need to make sure that the retailers on one end, for you and me as consumers, if I'm going to buy a bag of shrimp, I would love to see not only the price tag and actually a nice fancy marketing, but I also love to see the footprint there, and not in the form of a green leaf or something qualitative.
No.
I want to see how that product actually compares to the other product.
How can I comprehend that too, right, as a consumer?
Exactly. So you see now clearly a movement in what I call good for me and Nutri-Score. It's all about nutritional value for the product, and it's good for me. But I'm totally convinced at one point that it will also be good for the planet in there. So a Nutri-Score and another score, which will actually give you as a consumer the kind of choice you want to make. And that's got to be up to any consumer, whether you want to go for something very delicious, maybe not so healthy, and the other way around, etc. But at least you make an informed kind of decision at that point in time. And now there's just a plethora of all kind of marketing labels and whatnot more. And you can't compare them as a consumer. Now that's where making the invisible visible and sustainable, for example, comes in, because you make it measurable, quantitative, so you can start comparing farms. And that's what I call then the race to the top, because one farm can be compared to the other one.
Oh, it's very interesting. We have to move on because I have a lot more questions for you. But it's a fascinating topic. So your presentation mentioned the trifecta. Actually, this ties quite a lot into this of economics, climate change, and boundaries of planet Earth. How do these interconnect?
Now, I think they're strongly interconnected, and you see it actually happening more than I like actually even this year. So climate change, it's clear that the climate is changing. So I think there should be no debate about it. I think there is still a debate about whether it's man-made or not, or a debate. I think a minority of people are still actually arguing that. But climate change, as a matter of fact, temperatures are rising, etc., glaciers are melting, etc., is clear fact. The temperatures are rising. It's also fact. Then on the other hand, actually, then you have the boundaries of planet Earth. Already actually alluded to that a minute ago on arable land. There's only one planet, and if you look into the map, where's the arable land? It's not going to increase. If any, there's a little bit more formation of deserts, and the quality of the land is also being depleted. So let's assume that that's going to stay the same as it is, or maybe even decline. So that's the boundaries of planet Earth. And then, of course, economics. If the arable land is going to stay the same or decline, if climate change is going to make an impact on that arable land or even the oceans in terms of fish harvests, etc. I'm a very simple guy, but if supply is not going to go up or even go down, and demand is going to go up because we will be with 25% more people on this planet, supply and demand tells me prices, cost, everything will go up. And we all complain about inflation right now. And I'm afraid there's a underlying factor here, because it was energy, of course, driving up a lot of inflation in Europe, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, energy prices going up tremendously, but there's been something else going on, and that's food prices going up tremendously, not only because of energy, it's also because of crop pricing going up. And why are crop prices going up? Not only because of the Russian-Ukrainian invasion again, but also because there's a limit to arable land. So it has a direct impact on economics. Yeah. Economics of us, consumers, what we can afford, also economics of actually shrimp farmers, salmon farmers, etc.
You have a very fascinating project going that has been founded with Evonik a few years back. I want to talk about that since we come from an aquaculture angle. Veramaris, I think now we can call that a success. What was the ambition? How did that develop? And where is that still going, Veramaris?
It's a fascinating story, really, because in all fairness, where it was actually kind of created and all the discussions happening also with Evonik, but also all the research being done, I was not even active in animal nutrition, so I will not even claim to fame here. But basically, the business leaders at that point in time, but also the research people, they start to recognize that there is a limit to what the oceans can provide. So the theory was, at one point, we'll actually reach the limits of fish oil supply from the oceans, and fish catch will go down or stay the same, whereas demand goes up. That was the theory. And we said, okay, we need to get going really by the end of, let's say, 2019, 2020, just to be ready actually in time. That's what we did together with Evonik. So we developed that strain from algae. So we really go back to the original source of omegas. And many people think that the omegas come from fish. No, fish are acting as a bit of a harvester of actually the omegas from algae and fish, etc. Now, that's what we did. So we went back to original source. And we developed a strain which is able to produce EPA and DHA. Very unique. So there's many strains just doing DHA, but not EPA and DHA, which is very important for health for fish. Now, long story short, we built that plant. And now, you see exactly what I tried to describe earlier on the boundaries of planet Earth, but also climate change. And of course now aggravated to quite a large extent with El Nino, where you see the fish actually really going down to cooler kind of zones, of course, in the ocean. Yeah, the fish catch is abysmal. Mm-hmm. So oil prices are going through the roof. Yep. And there's many players, I just said it as well, a little bit of a teaser towards our customers, because we can try to dive and ignore what's happening, but at one point you will be confronted by it. Mm-hmm. And it might actually be sooner rather than later. And now we have more demand than we can even supply. Excellent, but at the same time, it's excellent for economics, financial reasons, etc. for Veramaris. But if you think about it, it's not excellent at all.
No. It does give an indication, however, what's needed, right?
It gives an indication on what's needed. That's number one. And I think there we need to ramp up actually these kind of investments generally actually in the value chain. That's number one. But also two, what really disappoints me is that there's still quite a bit of the here and now thinking. We need to think maybe 2-3 years further out. I'm not even saying 10 years. Yeah. 2-3 years out. Is what we're doing today, is it really going to be sustainable, and can we still have access to feed or oil or whatever? And if the answer is, well, maybe not, maybe you need to start acting now rather than actually wait till it's too late.
Yeah. No, I could talk about that all day with you. I think there's a lot we could get into. Yeah. But we have just a little bit of time left, so I'm going to go to our last question here, which concerns you personally. Your personal ambition. I can tell, you're well versed in the, let's say, mathematics of sustainability, really, looking at what has impact and whatnot. Many years to come, I'm sure you still have many years to do in your career. What's the personal goal looking back? What's the project where you say, we made that work and I'm very proud of that?
Yeah. There's actually two which come really straight to my mind. Actually, on the one hand, really seeing the use of data and actually bring this to our advantage. That is something I love to see actually happening, that we can revolutionize actually the animal nutrition value chain by using digital data. So the whole precision services and seeing that ramp up actually. And I think there's a big space there we can still actually create. So that's number one. Number two, as I mentioned earlier, actually on the single cell proteins and that protein gap. When I look into the data, it not only fascinates me, but it scares me also a little bit. And I think we as a company, and DSM-Firmenich, I think we are well positioned, but there's other companies there as well. We are sitting on something, we have a toolbox, and as such, we also have a responsibility. And what are we going to do? So if you're going to ask me in 20 years, hopefully I come back and look back at this interview and say, right, okay, and that was the moment that we started this. And we really, truly made an impact of solving and cracking that protein gap.
Perfect. I'll call you in 20 years and we sort that out.
Good.
Ivo, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much.